Recording in progress. Oh no.
There we go. Well then, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. We have already seen that we have covered quite some space on this planet. And we have Marcel here, who is apparently the one who's awake at 4 a.m. in the night, which is amazing. Yeah, let's kick this off. So this is the rough plan for today. We're going to have a quick intro on, who are the people in this room presenting this session for you. And then there will be a section about tips and tricks and potential tools to look out for and to use in the upcoming 30 days. And afterwards, a quiz and potential Q&A session. Right, so I'm Sasha. I'm participating in js13kGames for the, I believe, 5th time now this year. I haven't really won anything yet, but what can you do about that, I guess? I'm also the guy behind Sequelize, which is this Node.js ORM, and I'm an engineering manager over at eBay. And yeah, usually I'm rather tired because I have 3 kids, and I guess Anjay can sing a song about this one, but I guess it is the way it is. And with this, I would hand over to our special guest here, special guests, maybe even. Anjay.
Yeah, so I make games, I organize competitions. Some people know me for doing that. And we do all kinds of things with games. We were organizing local meetups when there was no pandemic. You are sending the weekly newsletter and all those things you can imagine doing with HTML5 games.
All right, and yeah, as said, I'm working for eBay. Just the general kind of advertisement slide that we have to add here, which is eBay is a global commerce leader, and we have tech teams all around the globe, sitting in Australia and in Israel, Germany, the US, obviously, and so on and so forth. And we also do have a tech blog, just in case you wondered what we're doing. You can find it over here. And obviously, eBay is looking for people. So if you're interested in finding a new job, you might want to check out this QR code over here. I'm just pausing for a second, and then Anjay can actually take over and present all the amazing news that have been added to this year's edition.
So
I'm just going to stop sharing, and then you can take over.
Okay. Give me a second. Okay. You should be seeing the slides.
Yep.
So welcome. It's awesome to have you. And so for those who don't know the competition, it's a month-long challenge to build a game in 13 kilobytes in a zipped package. And we have plenty of prizes and all the cool stuff. And so this year's theme is space, which you can interpret however you want. It could be the outer space, it could be space as in some place or something else. It could be a keyboard, key, or whatever. You can get creative about that. And make sure to not submit Space Invaders and asteroids unless it's like super creative in some way. But yeah. So why would you participate? First of all, for fun. You can challenge yourself in building games in 13 kilobytes. And you can grow some interesting skills that might or might not be useful in your job. You can meet some other crazy folks who squeeze JavaScript code into a zip package, and you can win some cool prizes. This year we have 6 categories. Last year we had 5. The new one is the decentralized category. So we have the classic ones: desktop, mobile, and server. the WebXR for VR, web monetization for earning money, and the decentralized is the new one. And in the decentralized category, there are some challenges. If you take on the challenges, you can win some coins. The web monetization category offers some cash prizes. The WebXR is introducing Play Canvas as the fourth engine. We still might get some hardware prizes, but for now there is none. But we'll see how it goes. There is also the Triska Reloaded game, which is a game made by Remvist, and the game is promoting the competition itself. You can read more about it, and you can play it and share your high score. There's a whole bunch of cool companies. First of all, eBay, who is also co-hosting this meetup. Thanks, Sasha. We have Near and Protocol Labs, who owns the IPFS, who are partnering with the decentralized category, and the Grant for the Web as a platinum partner, partnering with the web monetization category. And we have cool companies like Facebook, GitHub, Poki, Coil, Coliseus, Flux, Filecoin, Crazy Games, GameSnacks, and Upfire. So a whole bunch of cool companies who are supporting the competition. As usual, we have a whole bunch of prizes, software licenses, some physical swag, cash, t-shirts. I was going to tell about that later on, but yeah, coins, etc. T-shirts.
Oh.
Yeah, so here is the designer of all those t-shirts over the years. Yeah. So we have a cool design once again. There's a lot of experts who will focus on playing your entries and giving you constructive feedback. So all those experts will play some of the games and will tell you how awesome they are. So if you don't know, we do have a huge list of resources on GitHub. If you have some tools of your own, you can push the links there. If you don't have anything, you can look for the resources on that page. It's like lots of links of cool tools. There are also postmortems, which you can check for learning how games from previous years were built, because all the games from all the years are hosted on GitHub, all the sources, yeah. So 30 days is definitely not 48 hours. You can sleep, you can eat, you don't have to need energy drinks unless some of the companies will become partners. And you can sleep well, you can go to work, even if you don't want to. You can go on a vacations 1 or 2 weeks, and you can still get back and create something for the competition. So if you want to, you can actually do the 48 hours challenge 2 days before the deadline if you want to. Remember to brainstorm your ideas. You don't have to pick the first one you will come up with. As I said, Space Invaders and other tutorial clones. There might be more than one person thinking that it's a good idea to submit that. but you can actually spend time on like getting more ideas. If you can have a list of like 20 or 30, that would be really awesome. But like, I don't know, a few could be enough. And maybe that usually when we were brainstorming, it was like 5th or 10th idea that was aha moment for us. So that's really cool that you can have the time for that brainstorm. So you don't have to start coding right away. You can learn from others. As I said, all the games from previous years are hosted on GitHub, are available on the website to play. There are links to postmortems of other developers submitting their lessons learned from their entries. We have Slack, which is always helpful. And if you have any issues or problems, you can ask there. Yeah, and generally, if you are building an entry, if you submit it to the competition, remember that you can build a prototype, and it doesn't have to be like, you know, you don't have to squeeze all the levels, or you don't have to make it cool and shiny to a point that it's a finished product. There's always an idea to create a post-competition versions to a point that some games were actually released on Steam. So you can actually buy games that were once submitted as an entry to the competition. So to summarize, all the info is on the website, js13kgames.com. You have 13 kilobytes to create a game, to squeeze that into a zip package. It's a whole month, so you don't have to stress too much about the time. And there's cool prizes to win and respecting the hood. So good luck. And if you have any questions, just ask. Thanks.
Nice. Actually, I have already a question. Do we have any changes about how the mobile category is scored, is ranked? Because in previous years, I recall that desktop and mobile shared kind of the same score. Did it anyhow change?
So you mean that the mobile games will be voted differently than the desktop ones that just check that they possibly work on mobile, right?
That, yeah.
So it basically depends on the new backend and the new website, which still might happen this year. And so it's still an open question. And I hope this will work the way you want it to work, because this is the way I want this to work as well for at least a few years.
That would be amazing. Just to add some more context around this, usually what happens is, you know, people add some touchable controls, and then magically this is also a game for mobile, which is perfectly fine, right? But then the moment you get a score for the desktop category, it's also counted positively into the mobile version, which is kind of unfair for games which exclusively focus on mobile first or mobile at all. And this is what I was referring to, I guess. There are actually 2 questions in the chat, which is, can we actually submit more than one entry? And I guess the answer to this is hell yes.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And the other one is somebody was asking about the link to the slides that you just shared. And then another one, do you have any example for the decentralized category? So many questions already, I love it.
So I will post a link to the slides in a minute. So decentralized. There is a recent blog post on the blog about the decentralized category, which explains some things that were unclear. And one of the section is about resources. So we do have a bunch of links to the resources. So there are examples. I'm actually working on an example that will be suited specifically for the competition. I wanted to have it ready by today, but life happens. So I hope this will be released next week. The plan is to have a 3SCA reloaded game that is open sourced on GitHub, have both NIR and IPFS and other technologies implemented in a simple way as a showcase to see how that could actually work within the 13 kilobytes game. So right now you can either focus on the gameplay alone or exploring other examples or other tutorials that are there. They might not be game dev specific, but there are some examples. There was a game dev JS Jam in April that had the decentralized category. There was a bunch of games that you can look into if you need some inspiration. If you want the documentation, then every partner's website is usually providing some documentation, some examples. So it could be looked into. But as I said, the competition-specific example and source code is in the works and should be out early next week.
Okay. Do we have more questions? I guess that was it for the moment. Please share this link if it doesn't. Yeah, it's not it. And I guess one more question I would have for you, Andrzej, is actually, what game are you going to build this year?
I won't have time to build any games.
Every time we have this kickoff, Andrzej is telling me he has never participated in his own competition. Can you believe this?
Oh,
yeah, I have absolutely no idea how to build a game in 13 kilobytes. That's awful.
Here we go. That's better.
Perfect. All right, so as we have just learned, this year's theme is space. I know that people went crazy about it. We are going to build asteroids clones like crazy this year. Or maybe not, let's see. And I would just take the time to kind of go through some tips and tricks and also tools that Andrzej already briefly mentioned. And before we go there, however, I wanted to do a tiny shout out to Maxime, who didn't want to speak about the section, but anyway, he is like one of those sources which you can just use to any kind of knowledge, basically, when it comes to js13kGames. He's a super avid contributor to the entire ecosystem. He loves code golfing, and also, I believe he's actually here. Maybe, is he still here? At least I've seen him earlier, so I'm not sure if he's still here.
He's here.
He's here. Okay, perfect. So the majority of what's coming up now is actually based on this kind of Twitter thread thing that he is posting every year. Some parts have been kind of stolen, let's call it, from others also. And then obviously there is the experience and stuff that I was gathering throughout the last couple of years. So let's jump into this. Are there any more questions? Somebody just said, thank you, Maxime, such a great contributor and teacher. So kudos to you. So essentially, when you develop a game, you're usually having like three kind of different phases, which is, well, you have this ideation phase, which, you know, kind of starts already just before the competition really kicks in, and also in the early days of the competition itself. And then you have like the implementation phase, obviously, and afterwards, usually you are over this beautiful limit of 13 kilobytes, and you have to kind of remove stuff again, or like use techniques to kind of compress as much as possible out of your game. And in those early days in particular, I know that Maxime usually loves to sit on his like chair in his garden. He has this notepad with him, and he's usually like scribbling ideas like crazy. So this is, for example, from track node found on the left-hand side from Leslie, I assume, which is based on this CSS 3D engine that he wrote. And on the right-hand side, that's an idea from 2020. And basically, really, it all starts with the fact that, you know, you have some ideas. Ideally, you have many ideas of them, and you just scribble them down and identify afterwards, okay, these ideas could potentially work, given this particular theme that we have this year. And then basically you throw away some of them, you try out some others, and then in the end you end up with a list which you could potentially implement throughout the upcoming 30 or 28 days or whatever it is. And then obviously, you have those judges, you have those experts, and all of them, they're going to spend this amount of time on your game, like some 2 minutes, some 5 minutes, some maybe even 15 minutes. But then afterwards, usually people carry on and try something out from other people, which means you should really focus on actually sparking the joy very early in the game. And you should obviously also try to carry over some of the joy that you would like to see in games in general. So in order to actually testify this idea, does your idea actually work? You take all of these, previously scribbled ideas and you kind of convert them into MVPs first to see if the idea actually works in real life, let's call it. And in particular, because people will usually carry on after, let's say, 2 minutes, you should really have some really early wow effects where you play the game, you start the game, you have some potentially even visually impressive stuff going on, but also the game mechanics itself, they just work. And this should be rather early in your game. And what Maxime loves to point out is the fact that actually fun is just much more important than visuals. And I have taken like 2 particular examples which I like from last year. I'm not saying they are looking like rubbish, right? Not at all. But you can totally see, compare it to like some other games that they are graphically rather like, let's call it rough, but still super much fun to play. And this is like, I believe, place 8 of last year, which is I want to Google the game. And essentially you have this rather low polygon Firefox logo, and the idea basically is to throw it into the Google form. By the way, totally feel free to interrupt, feel free to talk. But basically what we are seeing here, really like graphics isn't really like super in your face. It's rather just basic, but the overall game mechanics, it's just rather impressive, particularly if you carry on along the games where you have physics and you have other stuffs going on. Right, and then there was this other game, which is this one, which again, visually, it's interesting, let's call it. But from the pure game mechanics itself, it's actually quite fun where you kind of, first of all, you have this cursor, which is kind of following your mouse, and then you basically have to create this kind of path, and that guy is like walking across that path, and you have to catch his face, so to speak. Which again is like from a graphical point of view, it's kind of rough, I would say, but from the overall game mechanics and the overall fun aspect, it's actually quite nice.
Very innovative.
This is what Max.
Yeah.
Come again?
Very innovative.
So this is what Maxime is always referring to, focus on the fun part as much as possible. And then later on, if you can make it, polish it a little bit, focus on the visual just as a kind of almost secondary sort maybe. But fun is much more important, in particularly to what we have said earlier, people only really spend this amount of time on your games. And if there is no spark in that sense, they will just carry on and focus on something else. Yeah, and then, when we talk about the actual implementation phase, you usually end up with using some sort of particularly specialized frameworks. Maybe I was using Contra.js in the past, which is, I guess, many of you do know them, which basically is a framework which offers you kind of a game loop, and then you can render sprites on a canvas, and you can, just iterate and update over those sprites and change them over its lifetime. And there is something, again, from Maxime. He wrote that framework, which is using the 3D features of CSS. So here, this is CSS 3D, where you can essentially like draw. There is a JavaScript interface which allows you to draw DOM nodes in the end, and you can actually then manipulate them and kind of move the perspective around, and potentially somewhere here we have a pyramid, I believe. Here we go. Does it work? It doesn't. And then you can basically rotate the camera around, and it's making use of CSS. So if we have a look into the actual, like what's going on in the browser, you will see, okay, it's all like HTML, and then you can rotate the view kind of around those HTML elements. Actually, let me share the screen with you, this link with you, I guess, just in case you want to have a look into it. And then also last but not least, this got particular traction last year, I believe, which is this Gute game engine where, did I just copy it? There we go. Which is basically you have a game and it's all in one particular huge class looking like this, and then inside of this class you can initialize the game itself and then react to certain user interactions, user input. Also going to share this one. So this is one of the frameworks which I haven't tried out just yet, but it got promoted quite heavily on Twitter last year, I recall, and also on Slack actually. So maybe this would be interesting just in case. Yeah, and then obviously, as Anjay just pointed out, there are so many other frameworks which you can all find on this GitHub, on this js13kGames GitHub page under resources, and you basically have like frameworks. You have different kind of other like resources over here, sound, music, artworks, and so on and so forth. Maybe quick question to this round: who of you has ever used one of these engines before and can tell stories about it?
I used Contra for my asteroids clone a couple of years ago. And it was really good. It lets you like choose chunks of it, like you don't have to load in the whole thing, or you can get roll up to automatically do that, which is really useful.
Yeah, and I guess there's actually quite an excellent tutorial on how to build asteroids with Contra.
There is indeed.
Okay, there is somebody raised his hand. Just speak up.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I used Contra, and one of my problems was like close to the end, I noticed that on an Android phone, it really had some, the phone ran hot, and I couldn't make out what the problem was. So not only use a laptop browser to emulate a mobile device, but also try on an actual device before you submit it. Yeah, and music is important as well. So thanks for collecting all those frameworks.
Yeah, maybe to add to this notion of, actually tested on a real mobile device, I was realizing only like essentially minutes before I was submitting the game last year or the year before, it just didn't really work at all on mobile Safari because the audio wouldn't kick in, wouldn't initialize, and it was behaving totally different than on any other browser on desktop. So if you plan to actually submit something for mobile, make actually sure to test it on that particular device as well. Cool. Then there are some kind of easy low-hanging fruits when it comes to supporting many more different devices and also potentially submitting to different kind of categories. And the one hint that Maxime is always giving is, actually do support different kind of keyboard layouts. So for example, obviously like you have the QWERTY versus QWERTZ versus, is it AZERTY or something like this layout fronts, and then the German, for example, have a different one. The US obviously have a different one. So you have like this WASD versus ZQSD versus actually using the arrow key, and then potentially also, what is it, IJKL and so on and so forth. So you can actually, so for example here, you can easily support different kind of keyboard layouts. And
I think Xem was pasting like a tweet-sized piece of code that was handling all those inputs. So yeah,
I do recall a tweet which was, this is my new most favorite game engine. And he particularly pointed out that there was support for all of these keyboard layouts. And just to give you an understanding of what I'm talking about, so here, this is one of the winners of, or one of the high-level, high-score entries that we had for the last couple of years. Was it last year? I believe it was last year, or the year before. Spec-Shot. And here, basically, now you can support, like this is WASD, and also with the arrow keys, obviously, you can walk around. And then also when you press Q, it's going to the left. And also, it basically supports, no, I'm getting killed. But it basically supports all different kind of what we call it, movement keys, let's call it. So there is actually like a rather low-hanging fruit on this end that you can easily support different kind of locations, let's call it. How do I pronounce the name? Who you know, maybe?
Ryunochi. You can pronounce it Japanese, but I made it totally up, so it has no real meaning. You can put it apart into Japanese, and it's valid Japanese, but it's something I made up. And no, I'm not Japanese. I get the question all the time.
All right. So any opinion on this end? You have raised your hand, right? Did you?
Oh, sorry, I forget to lower it. Yeah, like you said before, put something on online as fast as possible. Try it out, test it. Andre mentioned game dev before, which is on itch.io. So perhaps that's also an option to upload the zip archive to itch.io and ask there for testers, because those are experienced in playing games. So you have a community you can ask for testing. Couldn't be. I don't know whether Andre put something up there. I haven't heard about that yet. Or perhaps we can just hijack the forums there.
And also is not going to react to this apparently. Angela, did you ever put a game for testing on itch.io to actually get feedback on this?
I think I put one game on itch.io, but it was like, I don't know, 10 years ago. But I can confirm that having a playable or like working prototype as soon as possible is crucial, because then if something breaks, you can always return to that previous working version. And asking for feedback is also super important, because if you work on something, you are focusing and you have like a narrowed view on what's possible or how it works. And asking other people working on totally different games can be super useful to have some better view on some other things. So that's totally recommended.
One more thing about controls actually is that you can rather easily-ish, let's say, make your game like mobile compatible, in the sense of you just basically add controls that it allows to play it actually on mobile if it isn't mobile first. So there's this one example here which was submitted, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, 2019, and actually it's designed to actually use it with the keyboard, but then that guy was like, let's just, add those controls on the very bottom. And then afterwards, now you can like press these. And, obviously when you have the mobile phone in your hand, it's kind of located towards your thumbs. So you can just rather easily now control this guy, which allowed him to actually also submit the game to the mobile section, mobile category. That could also be one option if you have a game which is working well on desktop. Maybe think about if it could also work out on a rather small device. And then last but not least, and this is kind of getting back to what was previously said about people only spending so much time on your game. It should really be self-explanatory in the sense of, just from very early moments on, it should just, spark, basically. It should just work without reading long texts. And then there was this one, somebody already talked about it, which is make use of actually only a single file ideally. And I can actually show you how this is working. So basically there are those tools which are bundling all your resources into one single file, usually like Webpack, Rollup, whatever it is. And I can show you just one example for, where is it? This game I was submitting 2019 probably, which is here. So you can see how there are so many in a moment. You will see it. like so many different JavaScript files over here, and then you have like different kind of technologies like rollup, Webpack, and so on and so forth, which will then basically generate a single HTML file out of this. And the reason why this is interesting, it's not so much about actually like saving something particular, but rather when you actually now zip this file, it's just way more efficient to zip a single file as opposed to having many smaller files, which you then basically have to have in this archive, because every file you put there has to be kind of indexed, has to be saved, and it is making the zip file actually bigger. So make use of one of these bundling tools. And now we have like this one HTML file, which then afterwards essentially zipped. And then also we have like different kind of compression tools. So here there is like this one tool, which is again coming from Maxime. He's basically just taking the input, throwing it into Cursor, and then it basically is minified afterwards. And for example, here, if we now take like all this JavaScript that is coming out of this compression thing, why is it so small? There we go. You can actually see how here. We'll take this, you can actually like calculate the size. So here we have like 37 kilobytes, and then basically it squeezes out some more bits and pieces over here and there. And for example, just to pick one, I have this progress bar class, for example, which basically it just shrinkens, certain class names, certain variable names, and so on and so forth. But not all the time I've figured out. So for example, here I have this health points variable, and I have no idea how to get rid of it, but I'm also not a Cursor expert in that sense. But potentially the more you really compress your JavaScript code, obviously the smaller it is becoming. And I see there's some stuff in the chat, so maybe have a look into this. There's a question for you, Andrzej. Do I need to upload the full version to GitHub somewhere?
So yeah, there will be two versions. One is just a compressed, crushed, minified code that will be put into the zip. So you will squeeze that into 13 kilobytes that will be submitted through the form on the website. And the other version of the source code in a readable form should be hosted on GitHub. So other folks will be able to look into your source code and learn something from that. So one is the readable version of the source code, and the other is something you are compressing and submitting through the form and answering the question. I don't need to submit anything in the first day of the 30-day competition anyway.
It's not ready yet.
But where am I going to submit my 30 Astro tutorial games?
I'll give it a few days.
Give it a few days and it'll come.
It will come with a new website, maybe. Just to have explained what Cursor is really all about, it basically throws away stuff that you potentially don't need in your code and also renames certain things. So for example, here I'm creating like this object and call the greet method on it, which essentially is the same as just calling this function to begin with. So this is what Cursor is optimized for. And yeah, it does exist as obviously this web version here, but there are also like command line tools and Webpack plugins and so on and so forth. So you can just, depending on which kind of environment you are choosing, there are plugins for these kind of things everywhere. And then also there are different kind of compression tools in the sense of creating those zip files. I know that Maxime has also posted some others, but he was particularly fond of this tool, which is called ECT, which one of my colleagues actually found like 3 years ago or something like this. And it basically really is a tool written in, I believe, C++ or something, which is really focusing on squeezing the most out of things, with support for also images. And just to show you how well it actually performs. So if we go to this, let me move around some stuff here. What did I just do? So I have the source directory over here, right? Where all my source code obviously is in. And if we just zip it now, you will see that it is. It has this particular size, so 29 kilobytes something, and but obviously this is with all those single and small files. And now we can actually call this ECT command, and you can basically recompress an existing zip file, and it squeezes now out another 3 kilobytes out of those 29. So we have saved around about 10%, out of these, out of the zip file basically for free. And Maxime just posted the link to this tool. So you can just download it, put it into your either path or into your project, and you get some more space for free, essentially. You can also actually make use of this on images. So let's have a look. I have this, this thing over here. I assume there won't be much because I already compressed it, but maybe just give it a try. I don't have this image now. Do I have an image somewhere? I will find an image later on, but basically you can call ECT efficient compression tool or something like this on images, and it will basically will keep the same image, but it will remove everything that you don't really need to actually see any difference. So you actually also gain some more bytes if you're dealing with images.
You can also use Tiny PNG, which is an online tool.
Yes.
You just upload
There
your
we
image.
go.
Much easier.
Exactly that. I've realized that even if you use Tiny PNG, so Tiny PNG is like a tool where you can just upload an image and it will kind of compress it without any noticeable difference. And I've realized even if you use this and run ECT afterwards on it, it's still better. I don't know exactly why, but you know, just give it a try. It doesn't really harm. So you can just basically upload any or drag any PNG into this area, and it will make it smaller. There we go. And also, given that everything that you put into a zip file will make the zip file bigger, you really want to try out to squeeze everything into a single file. And this means when you work with images, you might want to try to actually convert this image into a text form, either using SVG or, which in the end is text, or you actually convert your PNG, your JPEG, whatever it is, your GIF file maybe. You just convert it into its base64 representation, which will then make the zip algorithm more efficient. And this is what you can actually see over here in, is it here? Yes. So in my project, in my rough raw source code, I'm referencing PNG files. But then overall, in the end, they are all converted into its base64 representation here. And then because of this, it is part of the actual index.html file, which means the moment the zip file is coming and kind of archiving it, it will be included in this one single file, which again is making it smaller. Yeah, and then also there is this one tool which Maxime just recently, I assume, created, which is this SVG creator tool where you can kind of, does it work? Yeah. Where you can create like your own kind of images. So for example, you can create circles and then it creates you the SVG representation of this image. So if you are planning to build something yourself, some images, you can potentially use this. And you can also use kind of fill it with different kind of color. And then afterwards, you just copy out this SVG, paste it into your project, and you have it in your index.html file straight away. Just waiting here. And apparently you can also use WebP just to have that set. Good call, I guess. And Jerome is also referring to this advanced compression, I assume, tool, which I've also tested in the past. And for whatever reason, the ECT one was still more efficient. So really just give it a try. It also totally depends somehow. Sometimes this one is better. Sometimes ECT is just more efficient. I haven't really figured out why this is, but just give them a try out both, and then maybe you can squeeze out another 20 or something bits here and there.
Yeah, the ACT is definitely better. I'm just lazy, and if there's no build for Mac, I'm not compiling from source. So this is why advanced comp is also nice, because it comes with Mac. You can install it on Mac with Homebrew.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
laziness.
So I do know what you mean, and I believe this wasn't available earlier, but just recently this guy has released a new version, and it also comes with macOS support pre-compiled. But I do know what you mean, and I was compiling it myself in the last couple of years all the time, so there are improvements. Okay. What did I wanted to say? Yeah. Maybe you don't even need images. You will find out, I guess, over time, but there are obviously lots of shapes, lots of emojis just in the ASCII standard. And again, Maxime, he was like creating this game, Track Not Found, last year, and it's not exclusively, but also based on ASCII images. So for example, this train thing here, that's an emoji in the end, which is kind of converted into 3D by adding more shapes or more shapes around it, basically. And you can read through this article over here, which explains how you do it and well, how he was doing it and how you could potentially use this, leverage this in your own entry. And then last but not least, this is, I guess, like the default thing. If you go with games, you can obviously create sprites, and these sprites will then basically sprites are basically a collection of different kind of images into a single image. Then they can basically take particular areas of this image to show them on the screen. Particular thing over here, which is generating sprite images for you. So you can just download them afterwards, and it will also generate. Whoop. And I can't see anything. So you have like these three, it's already kind of does it work? Yeah, it's already a sprite, but basically this is now combining all of these three sprites into a single file, and you can just download it, and afterwards you can make use of these CSS classes, which will give you this particular area of the original image. So if you have many small images, you can just throw them into here and then potentially leverage the zip algorithm a bit more. And then here, when it comes to 3D graphics, I'm not really an expert at all when it comes to this. But again, Maxime has us covered. There is an amazing article actually about WebGL, how to get started, what it actually means, what you can do with it. And also, as said earlier, you can totally make use of CSS. And maybe let me just post it as well. He has done some demos in the past, and this, again, like Track Not Found is based on the CSS 3D framework. And there are some demos, like demo images over here with how it looks like. And I was just recently playing around with this thing, which again is based on CSS, and it essentially creates you certain shapes on a particular plane or particular layer in that case. And you can then afterwards kind of copy this over and make use of this in your own game. Then you can rotate it, and you can make use of these CSS 3D stuff, basically. Anyone here in this room who was doing 3D in the past and who want to share some tricks or some tools that he was using in the past? He or she, that is.
Well, there is ray marching, of course.
What was that?
There is ray marching, of course, or sphere tracing. That is also quite an interesting technique because indeed it's quite easy to express very complex images or very complex 3D worlds by just defining a single distance function and let the GPU do all the work. And of course, I will paste a link to some resources about that.
Perfect. Right. Yeah, somebody mentioned earlier that sound is super important, and I cannot really second it more, I guess. There are some particularly interesting tools which are coming from, is it Frank? I believe it's Frank, right? Yes. Frank actually here today, Frank Force, probably not. So he was writing this super small sound synthesizer, and you can, again, I have only like so much experience on how this really works, but basically it will like generate sound for you, and then you can essentially copy out this one and can paste it, bless you, maybe, can paste it over into your JavaScript project, and then it will basically play the same sound again. And you can now actually obviously combine these sounds to make music out of it again. And then there is like this addition, which is this one, which is actually, there you go. Which is this one, which allows you to actually generate like real songs based on, again, the CFX. There you are. And I can try to play this song, but it might be a little bit loud. So let's see. I guess you can hear this, maybe. Did that work? Did you hear anything?
No.
Well, no. Okay. Well, anyway.
Not much, but
It's
Not much.
The meeting was like
Wait a
just
second.
tiny little bit. Stuttering.
Better? No? There is
Yeah,
sound.
snatches of
Excellent.
sound.
yeah, there's something.
So again, it is all based on you basically generate a rather efficient way of a song representation, and then you can just play it in your game as like background music, for example.
So one thing about those like music and sounds in general. So I mentioned the 3ska Reloaded game. The game itself is on GitHub. The sources are available. The game was built in 13 kilobytes. It's actually like 6 kilobytes zip. So if there are any sound engineers, musicians who would like to add sounds or music to 3ska, please get in touch. That would be nice to have in the game because there's still some space left there.
All right. Who's playing this music here? All right. So apparently it does work. That's good, I guess. Good news. Last but not least, there is this one project, TinyFont.js, which is written by one of my colleagues, Timo Maninov, actually. And this is really there is an example. This is like a framework which allows you to actually draw text on a canvas. And it is rather lightweight, I believe, something around, does it read anywhere? Yeah, less than 700 bits zipped. And I will just share this link as well. There you go. Also, this is one of those projects I was always using to get started. Actually, it isn't perfect, to be honest, but at least it has all the bundling, and you have this particular directory, you put your code in there, and afterwards you will end up with a zip file. This is what I was always using. I believe there was somebody actually posting something else. So maybe if you feel like it, feel free to share your starter project again. But this has turned out rather useful in the past, and you might want to have a look into this. It works quite well, actually. And then, as we have talked already about itch.io, if you can not only use it to actually upload like beta versions of your game, but also to actually get game assets out of it, because you have potentially access to free sprites or to free like tile sets for certain games. So this could be a potential resource to actually get those things. And then there's also open game art, which again, well, obviously is all about, free and open game resources to some degree, including sounds, including images, including everything. And last but not least, you have access to all the game codes that have ever been submitted to, well, ideally at least, to js13kGames. So you can totally have a look into, how was Swagshot built, how was Pizza Delivery built, how have all of them been built. Just look into the actual game that was submitted, the entry itself on js13kGames, and you will find a link to the source code usually. And then last but not least, if you feel like you need totally some nice music when you're working on your games, there you are. This will open some Spotify playlist, which again I believe was created by Timur, and it might get you into the right vibes. So this is this. And again, I will share the slides afterwards, so you don't have to copy over all of these links, but you will also have access to it afterwards. I'm going to share it maybe on Meetup, I guess. And with this, I'm actually done with the tips and tricks section. Do we have more notes, more hints, more stuff that people should look out for?
I don't have a particular tool, but I would really encourage everybody to figure out their build chain at the very beginning of the jam, so you don't scramble at the last second, 1 hour before the deadline, on how to like put everything in a zip file, compress it, figure out, oh my, I'm 2 kilobytes over, to have already the whole like tree shaking, bundling, minifying, compression figured out. Even my own build script, like how it puts the zip file every time I make a change, the zip size every time I make a change. As soon as I push to GitHub, I've got a GitHub action that also puts it on a GitHub page, so I can actually test it. Yeah, like this way I know I can just focus on the game and I don't have to worry about this. So I think it pays to spend a couple of days, well, probably less at the beginning of the jam getting this done.
Yes,
completely having a good build tool is really nice for like being able to make a change and just seeing it in the web browser instantly. The one that I put together even has like hot reloading of CSS. So if I make any of the changes in the CSS files, it doesn't even refresh the page, so the game state doesn't change at all. It just changes the look of it, which is nice.
Yeah, I think I started mine copying a 2016 entries using Gulp, and I've made it evolve. But I just remember this OR story where Maxime was sharing that he was copy pasting his source code into a website and copying this manually. I'm like, come on!
I think he's still planning on doing that.
This is actually what happened to me last year. You can actually see it over here, how I'm like 0.13% over my actual file size limit. And what I did afterwards, I copied out the HTML and deleted certain aspects and replaced it with shorter characters. And in the end, at some point, some magic happened to make the zip file small enough. So yeah.
I saved loads of space.
This is the part that Andreas is missing out on by not completing. It's that last hour. You've got 13 bytes over the limit, and you're trying to figure out, how do I get rid of those 13 bytes?
Yeah.
If
you're using a minifying,
live reloading, get all that stuff sorted early on.
Yeah.
And I think I modified the build script so that I had a little notification on my desktop. So I compile, I carry on working, and a notification on the site popped up to say it is, 5 bytes over, 10 bytes under, whatever. So it's quite nice to have.
Yeah. If you're using something like Tersa for minifying, you can save quite a few bytes by making sure that the variable names that you've used or the object properties aren't on like the list of things that don't get minified. So for example, if you have one of your properties called zoom or rotate or anything that Tersa thinks is like a browser thing that might mess up, then you should perhaps rename that class. And I've even done it in build tools before. I've like gone through my entire JavaScript file and regex replaced all the things that Tersa thinks maybe shouldn't be changed to sort of force it to minify everything.
I remember an edition where we had local storage access shared across different games. Is that something that will happen again, or are those to be played on different instances of the server at the end? I mean, that was quite some fun with messing with someone else, local storage and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the safe answer is, if you're putting something in the storage, you can have a prefix for your game, and then when you're reading that specific pieces. And I think there's still like, don't use clear all on your entry, because you will probably wipe other saves or other data. So again, this is like the state of things right now. if we happen to have a new website with new functionalities, this might get solved, but it's better to prefix your stuff and don't clear everything.